Aloha everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. I just want to welcome you to the Hawaii Public Health Training Hui's May training, Crisis and Emotional Intelligence, a Family Perspective. We are joined by our guest speaker today, Anisa Wiseman of NAMI, Hawaii. Next slide, please. My name is Stephanie Moyer and I'm the Community Initiatives and Training Coordinator for the Hawaii Public Health Institute. Another organizer for this training is Makamai Namahoi, our contracts, grants, and operations assistant, also with Hi-Fi. And we are also helped out by the Hawaii Public Health Training Hui Steering Committee, which is a committee of 14 different members from various organizations. Next slide. I'd like to thank our sponsors and partners for today's training, the Hawaii Public Health Training Hui, the Western Region Public Health Training Center, and the Public Health Learning Network. Next slide, please. We are offering continuing education credits for today's webinar in our regular 5 areas in CHES, dietetics, nursing, social work, and CSAC. Next slide. In order to receive your continuing education credits, you needed to have registered and attend the live webinar. I will be sending out an email, or I will be emailing you out a link to complete the evaluation following the webinar today. And we are asking that you please complete that evaluation by today if possible, at the latest on Monday. If you are attending the webinar by phone, please make sure to email me at Stephanie, that's STEPHANIE, at HIPHI.org. And please include your name and phone number that you used to dial into the webinar. If after 2 weeks you have not received your certificate, please email me and let me know. Next slide, please. For those seeking nursing credits, I do want to disclose that the planners and presenters have no relevant financial relationships to disclose. Next slide. Again, for those seeking nursing credits, you do also need to complete the evaluation form for the University of Arizona, and the website is listed here on this slide. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, you do need to complete their evaluation. It does expire after 2 weeks, and the password to access that evaluation is the word crisis with a capital C. Next slide. All webinars are recorded and uploaded to the Hawaii Public Health Training Hui's YouTube channel, so you are welcome to visit this after the webinar is completed if you want to watch it again or share it with your networks. Next slide. The learning outcomes for today's webinar are: learn what crisis intervention means and how it is being applied within your community, identify and learn some coping skills to put into your toolbox, learn how to communicate during a crisis, define emotional intelligence and identify aspects of it within themselves, and discuss aspects of emotional intelligence within themselves and others. Next slide. It's my honor to introduce you all to our guest speaker, Anisa Wiseman. Anisa was born in Hawaii, lived on the mainland for some time, and graduated from Kahuku High on the North Shore of Oahu. She went on to get her bachelor's at the University of Hawaii, West Oahu. She is a former special education teacher, business owner, successfully lives in recovery from PTSD, anxiety, and depression, and has family members with severe mental illness and substance abuse. If you have a single parent with a severe mental illness without proper healthcare or support, then comes everything else: the domestic violence, homelessness, etc. She currently works as program director and walk manager for NAMI Hawaii, where her experience is able to help others through their crisis. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Anisa.
Hi guys. Oh, there's my video. I'm gonna start my video so you can see me. I have an icebreaker here, but I'm not gonna use it. So I'm just gonna go straight into it. Hopefully you all can hear me well and everything's fine on that end. So I work for NAMI Hawaii. We are the largest grassroots mental health organization in the US. Our mission is to support, educate, advocate, and bring awareness to those whose lives are affected with a mental health condition. So it's not only peers, but also family members as well. Here are some statistics. 50% of all lifetime cases of mental illness begin by age 14 and 75% by age 24. 10 years is the average delay between the onset of symptoms and treatment. And 70% of youth in state and local juvenile justice systems have a mental illness. Those are kind of not very pretty statistics in my opinion. And also I want to say thank you for everybody being here. I am a little bit anxious because of the number, but I'm happy to be here. And then also, I think it's important for you guys to know we're going to talk about feelings and emotions. For some people, they don't like to get into that foo-foo stuff, but when a person is in crisis, they are not in control of their feelings or emotions. And that's why it's important that we are. You know, if they're in crisis, of course they're not in control. And so it's important that we should be, so that we can hold the space for them. And if we keep our emotions and feelings in check, we can make sure that we don't escalate their feelings and emotions. And a lot of the time we don't know how to be with people in crisis because we can't even deal with our own stuff, let alone hold the space for somebody else's. So I focus a lot on emotional intelligence because through NAMI, what I learned was you cannot change anybody else but yourself. And that's where your power is. And when you start to do that, that's when the magic happens. Okay. So I found NAMI, I just had an interaction with my mom. She's diagnosed bipolar with psychosis sometimes. And I was kind of at my last just breaking point. I didn't know what to do anymore. So I went home and I did a Google search. Don't know what I was looking for. I was just looking for something and I found NAMI. And through NAMI, I started going to the support groups. And the support groups I saw, okay, I'm not the only one going through this. And also it was a great place for that group wisdom, right? So I could talk to other people who may have been in my shoes already and kind of see what worked or didn't work for them. I started volunteering for NAMI. That was this picture is of the first walk I did. My mom is second to the left in this photo. And actually, our first walk we went to, my mom was completely manic. She had like cut up her t-shirt on the back and wrote 69 on the back because, you know, sometimes they get hypersexual, and Anisa's mom and just all this stuff. And normally when we go out in public, I'm not worried about what people are thinking about me. It's what people are thinking about my mom. And at the walk was the first place that I could be in public with my mom, enjoying the activities that were there, and I didn't have to worry about the stigma. And that was just like this huge weight just lifted off of my shoulders. So NAMI to me is so much more than support groups and services and education. It's also community. And those are some of the leading factors in recovery, right? Community and family support. So these are the programs that we have here in Hawaii. Our support groups, which I already talked about, we have some that are online right now, and you can see them on our website. We also have all of these services are free, a family-to-family class, which is an 8-week class, and you learn basics like brain chemistry and medication, and then you go on to like problem solving, empathy, and how to navigate the system. So it's 1 day a week for 8 weeks, and it's that long because it's research-based, and that's what they've shown. It takes that long for change to happen, right? Because we cannot change the individual, we have to change ourselves. And then we have our CIT program, which I'll get into a little bit and further on, which it's basically community partnerships with the Honolulu Police Department and other community organizations, not only us, and we partner to bring people out of the cycle of crisis and into recovery. We also have Ending the Silence, where we go into schools and talk about mental health and where to get help at, so that they know how and why and if to get help when they need it. And then we have our walk that I talked about, which that's where most of our funding comes from, is our walk every year. And so in that way, we're pretty much directly funded by our community, which I think is also very magical. I'm just going to share this. This is a video. I was walk manager for the first year last year, and so I'm very proud of what we were able to create. So I'll just share this real quick. It's about a minute long, but I won't share the beginning. Oh, no. Sorry about that. All right, just wanted to show you guys just a little taste of what the walk is, because again, it's about community for me, and it's not just peers, it's family members, it's mental health professionals. You know, we're all there in the same place together. And also, so when I was younger, I didn't know what I was feeling, let alone how to cope with it. So I developed a lot of negative coping skills, self-harm being one of them for me. And so this year at the walk, we had different tents of different coping skills. Just because, you know, I don't like to stigmatize talk therapy or medication. I just think there are so many different tools now that we can use to support our mental health that we sometimes just get stuck on those two things. So I want to be the person that I needed when I was younger. So just to give people a little taste of, like, we had songwriting, and I had meditation, and I had yoga, just all different kinds of things, so people could just get a little taste and see what it was like. Just want to plant the seed, you know. We also had a great big music circle, so everybody felt connected there. And again, it's about community. So what is CIT? So CIT stands for either Crisis Intervention Training or Crisis Intervention Team. And a GEF, it's a collaborative community partnership and proper training. So they get 40 hours of training within this program. It reduces arrests of people with mental illness while simultaneously increasing the likelihood that individuals will receive mental health services. The police officers that get chosen for this program, they're not voluntold to do it. They're all volunteers because unless they want to be there, it's not going to work. And it takes, again, it takes looking at yourself and being aware of yourself and your own emotions in order to deal with other people in crisis. Some of the basic goals are to improve officer and consumer safety and to help persons with mental disorders and or addictions access medical treatment rather than place them in the criminal justice system due to illness-related behaviors. So CIT does not work without community. We were one of 4 in the nation to receive a technical assistance grant. So CIT International actually came over here. And one of the first things that we did with them was we had a, for some reason I can't think of the name of it, it's just escaped my brain. Anyways, we had everybody in the same room. We had HPD, we had fire, we had Department of Health, Mental Health America, all community organizations. And we went step by step, okay, what happens when somebody gets arrested? And then after they get arrested, where do they go? And we just went and identified all of our gaps. And then we looked at our gaps, and then we tried to see what community resources or organizations are already in place that we can put into those gaps. So CIT is really, it's a 40-hour training about mental health, and then it's also connecting officers to community resources, so that maybe they come across somebody on the street and they're not doing anything illegally and they're not a threat to themselves or others, so they can't take them to the hospital, but obviously this person is still in crisis and they still need help. So one of the things that now they know, oh, I have my buddy Michael or whatever at IHS, what if I gave him a call and he came and checked on this person, or et cetera, et cetera. So it gives police officers more tools to do their job safely and effectively. It's associated with improved officer attitude and knowledge about mental illness. So I've had also a few different run-ins with police officers when my mom was in psychosis, and it really depends on who you get, because there's some officers that they don't necessarily know how to deal with the situation in front of them, and so they don't really want to deal with it, and so they're not as helpful. Or you get the officers that have already done this multiple times and know what to do and can be helpful. So it kind of depends. I don't know if this is the case now, but there will be a point where you can call 911 and then request a CIT officer, which that is the best case scenario, and I hope that will happen soon. I thought that I already could, and I had a crisis, I don't know, I guess it was about a year ago now, with my mom, and I tried to call 911, and I was like, can I have a CIT team? I want a CIT officer out, and she's the 911 lady was like, what is CIT? I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, well, they're trained to deal with crises like this. And, oh, ma'am, all police officers are trained to deal with these crises. And I'm like, no, you don't understand what I'm saying. So, sorry, I got distracted by looking at the chat box. So I'm trying not to look at the chat box right now. So in the future, when people do have these crises, because we're getting phone calls all the time at NAMI. We're a warm line, but we're pretty much a hotline. And most of the time, it's not these individuals with a mental health condition that are giving us these phone calls, right? Because they're not able to make this phone call, and some of them don't even know that they're in crisis. It's the family members that are calling us. What do I do? How do I help my loved one? And so if we're able to then tell them, oh, if dial 911 and ask for a CIT officer, it will change their whole experience of what happens next. Because, even having to dial 911 for my mom multiple times, it's traumatic. It's traumatic for everybody involved. And if the officer is not properly trained, it just escalates the situation. And it's really, really hard. So also it's produce cost savings. It's difficult to estimate exactly how much diversion programs can save communities, but incarceration is costly compared to community-based treatment. For example, in Detroit, an inmate with mental illness in jail costs $31,000 a year, while community-based mental health treatment costs only $10,000 a year. So that's a pretty good chunk of money that we could be saving, right? And again, we're in this like revolving door where people are in crisis, and then we just put them in the hospital or put them in jail, and then they just continue staying in crisis. We want to get them out of that and into recovery. So mostly we provide speakers for the Family and Peer Perspective panel, and even CIT International, they will say that this is probably one of the most important pieces of the training, because it builds loads of empathy and understanding for police officers. And most of them, they only see people in crisis. They don't know what their life was like before or after. All they're seeing is them in crisis. So it's an opportunity to hear before and after a crisis. And it shows that people do recover, that the things that they're helping us do make a difference in not only our lives, but our families' lives as well, right? I shared one of my stories the first time we did the training. We've had 3 trainings now. We were supposed to have another one, but with all of this, it's not happening. But when I first did the training, I shared about my mom and my experience, and kind of the things that didn't feel good and that did feel good throughout, and afterwards, there was a few officers that said, because of what you shared with me today, I will do my job better as a police officer. So that just that building that empathy and that connection with me, it was so powerful. So family is in crisis just like the individual is. You know, a lot of the times, like, they'll arrive on the, like, the most recent time I had to call police for my mom, I was a mess. I had already been with my mom in her manic state for like a day or two now, and she was having involuntary muscle spasms, so she like had bruises all over her and stuff because she just could not stop moving and would like fall on the ground and pull chairs down on her and stuff. And in her delusion, she thought that I had held her down and given her all those bruises. So I was already an emotional wreck. I remember the police officer arrived on scene, and I was like squatting and breathing and trying not to throw up because I was feeling, my anxiety was just like top level, and I was feeling like I was gonna hurl. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of officers don't realize. Like, not only are you gonna have to help me deal with my mom, but I need a little bit of support too. And so also hearing that side or that perspective gives them a little bit more to go off of when they go on scene. Because also, if you're not connecting with the family member that's there, it can also escalate as well. And Sam Cochran, he's one of the founders of CIT, who actually came and trained a lot of our officers so far. He said at our national convention, recovery starts at the moment of crisis. That's when it starts. You know, we don't wait till after crisis. No, as soon as crisis happens, that's when recovery starts. And that means for the families too, and making sure that they have the support, education, all of that they need in order to support their family member. So kind of our next steps are, you know, we're still identifying what our gaps are and filling them. Funding is a big deal. We'd like to have like a drop-off center in Honolulu for police officers, because we don't really have anything like that. At our conference last year, a year ago now, myself and my executive director, Kumi, we went to Seattle has a few crisis drop-off locations, and the way that they're doing things there is phenomenal. Amazing. I love it. Also sustainability. So a lot of our, during the 40-week training, there is parts that the police officers teach the police officers, but there's a lot of pieces where the community organizations are teaching it, right? Because it's about sustainability, and unless we all have our hands in it, it's not going to continue and it's not going to be sustained. So the community, us, we really need to take ownership of this program so that it continues. Also, I'm noticing there's got to be a lot of healing of the community. I'm born and raised on like that side of the table, and now to be on this side, it can feel really strange for me. And I'm noticing even a lot of stigmas within myself towards police officers that I'm having to confront. And I think it's the same with a lot of members of the community. Like when I go and talk about CIT, there's a lot of people are like, oh, the police aren't here to help, and da-da-da-da-da. And we really need to change that mindset. We need to start helping each other. As I heard Chief Ballard say at graduation, no longer is being a police officer about arresting people and taking them to jail. The future of being a police officer is community partnerships. And to hear her say that was just phenomenal. I'm like, okay, we're moving forward now. And then again, about the funding, I'm hearing a lot of people saying, you know, in the beginning, oh, we don't have funding for this. Oh, we don't have funding for that. But now we're kind of at the tables where we're like, we're going to find funding for this. We need this, and we will find funding. I think that's kind of everybody's mindset right now, which is really nice. And also just to work together, all of us community organizations, HPD, fire, EMS, all of us working together and sharing information has been a very magical process. So I just think it's important for you guys to just take a second to think about your own stigmas and place in our broken system. Just think about this in your head. What population do you work with? Are you holding on to stigmas because of the population you work with towards income levels, race, mental illness, disability, physical disease, etc.? As a child, did you have any experience with the system? How about any of your friends? What did this make you think about the system? What values and beliefs do you hold dear in your work? Why are they there? What experiences helped you to validate them? Why are you working at your job? Do you enjoy it? What does it mean for you? It's important to take a look at these questions, not just now, but throughout our lives, because just as we are continually growing and developing different ideas or opinions, these answers will too. So it's important to know where you are, how you got there, and where you are now so that you can effectively keep up with how everything around you is growing and you don't get stuck in the past, right? So healthy living, we all know how to be healthy. What is mental health and wellness? It's a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities. It means you can cope with normal stresses of life. You can work productively and fruitfully, and you're able to make a contribution to your community. Here are some signs of poor mental health. So excessive worrying or fear, feeling excessively sad or low, confused thinking, mood changes, avoiding friends, changes in sleeping habits, changes in eating habits, abuse of substances like alcohol or drugs, physical ailments, thinking about running away, low performance. And what does it mean to have a mental health condition? So it means person has difficulties with identifying and controlling their feelings, thoughts, reality, and or perception. And it affects their ability to understand others socially and function. People with serious mental illness account for only 3 to 5% of all violent acts. I just think it's important to plug that in there. This is before self-care and after self-care. So now we're going into like emotional intelligence and yourself. So this is the stress bucket here. Oftentimes we are putting all these things in our stress bucket, right? So it's an overflowing bucket of water. You have lack of sleep, environmental stress, whatever. And so we got to put things in there to take some of that water out. So making sure you're getting proper sleep, exercise, or seeing food as medicine. And you got to support yourself to empty out your bucket. If your bucket starts to overflow, you risk getting sick, injury, depression, mental health conditions, etc. So for me, it's really about the act of balancing and setting myself up for success so I don't topple over to the side because it can be difficult to get back up. I notice if I need to keep myself balanced here, so making sure I'm going to my coping skills every day, because if there are days where I don't, then I'm already kind of slipping to the side. And if something happens, it's very easy for me to just topple over. So this is our starting point, emotional intelligence. If you don't already have an understanding or knowledge of something, we have to start at the beginning and build a foundation of pathways for your skills to grow. You don't learn to walk by just walking, you crawl first. And sometimes if you don't follow the step-by-step directions of a piece of IKEA furniture, you end up with an extra screw or piece. You miss something. That's why we talk about emotions, and we start from the bottom with all our skills. You have to make it easy for yourself in the beginning so it can become a pattern. You're building foundations for neural pathways to grow. If it's not easy, it's too hard to do. And all of these skills take practice. I know firsthand. And it's fun sometimes to Google emotional intelligence statistics because it's quite fascinating. So what is emotional intelligence? It's having a high sense of emotional intelligence means an awareness and management of your own emotions as well as others. You're able to identify, evaluate, control, communicate, and express emotions in a healthy way. It's beneficial because it gives you the ability to understand and use feelings to work through challenges, to communicate with others, and to make decisions. You know, when I have interactions with my mom, I cannot change her. I can only change myself. So our interactions are no longer about her, they are about me and how I control and regulate my emotions. Because if she's mad and upset and I'm mad and upset too, we're just going to stay there. But if she's mad and upset and I can control myself here, it may take a little while, but eventually she has to meet me here too. So this is like a wheel of emotions, and then there are like secondary emotions and all of these. There's so many different kinds of emotions. And I think it's important to think about if you can name these emotions when you're in them. I've been working a lot on that, of when I'm feeling something, I'll go and I'll bring something like this up and, okay, what is it exactly that I'm feeling right now? Because if you're not paying attention to what you're feeling, then something can trigger you and you can escalate or whatever. And do you know what each of these emotions feel like, and how would you describe them? I remember I had a little mini coping skills workshop for kids. Maybe that was about 2 years ago. And I had asked this little boy, I said, you know, what does it feel like when you're mad? And he told me, oh, it's like there's this ticking time bomb in my belly about to explode and go off. I was like, that's such a great, just visual. Sorry, my mouth isn't working very well, I think, because I'm a little bit anxious. But anyways, it's a great visualization, I think, to be able to describe what you're feeling. So if you want to, you can share this. You don't have to. I'll have a few of these, like, please share with me in the chat box. If you don't want to, you don't have to. But what does intention mean to you? Why do we set intentions, and what things do we set intentions for? So to me, I just think about, you know, why do teachers give an objective for a lesson? So that you know what to be looking for. And our brains are already wired to look for patterns. So when we give ourselves an intention, we will be looking for ways to make it a success. It's like we're teaching ourselves a lesson and we get to choose how to learn it. They can be very powerful, and they can be whatever you want. They can be short, even one-worded, or pages and pages long, as detailed or as broad as you want. The beauty of it is that it's yours. You get to choose. You get to decide how you want to play it. And in that way, you kind of take back your power over the situation and set an intention with the things you do, even if it is just to be. Like, even if you're like, I just need to go and meditate right now, I'm going to set that intention. You know, just simple ones. And it gives you a purpose, a reason to be doing what you're doing, and you see how you start to grow. Let's read some of these. I set intentions to set my mind for something positive or joyous for the day. Intention to me means doing something with a purpose. How you do it, why you do it, when you do it. Exactly. And I think a lot of times for me, I want to make sure that I'm doing everything with a purpose, that I'm not just doing things because based upon my emotions, right? I want to be doing things for a reason, because if I'm only doing things because of the way that I feel, or if I'm only making decisions based upon my emotions, I'm not going to have a very happy life, right? I need to have that balance. And so intention or motivation helps me to have that balance. Intention helps you keep yourself accountable for how a situation plays out. I think of a yoga session and not getting upset about falling out of a pose, but being thankful for the way my body is able to move. Ooh, I like that a lot. That's nice. Intention gives myself a goal. So having motivation means you have a sense of what is important in life for you. This may be different for everyone, but it's important to know your whys. What motivates you, keeps you fueled, and gives you purpose. And a lot of people, they don't spend time thinking about these things. We don't. We take it all for granted. But it helps us to keep pushing forward and meet our goals. If you know what your intention is before you get into somebody with crisis, then it'll help you to keep staying there to hold that place for them, and you're less likely to get triggered, right? And just like you're always changing, so are your goals. So it's important to keep reassessing and reflecting on them and look at what is working and what isn't, and then reassess those goals accordingly. There's a shift in perspective, it leads to more motivation. And if you want, you can share in the chat box, what intentions can you set for your day right now? And what are some realistic goals? For me, my husband, I'm watching my 2 little cousins today because my aunt and uncle are both essential workers. My husband took them out of the house so I could do this. So later I'm going to have to do something fun with them. So that's one of my intentions, is to do something fun with them. So these are some questions to think about. You know, why are you here? What do you hope to do for your community? How do you see yourself growing? And what do you hope to develop in yourself? This person says, intention is not a word I grew up learning. Only in recent years, past 10 years, have I heard this word used. Very good to know and understand. Yeah, and again, when I was younger, I didn't have any intentions or looked at what was motivating me or anything like that. But when I do take the time to look at these things, it just, everything else becomes so clear. So self-awareness is the next kind of component of emotional intelligence. It means having an awareness of your emotions, behaviors, and feelings. So knowing what your strengths, weaknesses, joys, and triggers are, and knowing who you are and how you react and see the world. If you know what your triggers are, the things that make you happy, sad, excited, then you can properly plan. You're also aware of how your mood can affect the people around you. Again, your brain is looking for patterns, so the first step to changing any behavior is becoming aware. One of the first behaviors that I kind of was forced to change was my teeth grinding or my jaw clenching. And I remember having an argument with my dentist, like, oh, you can't, there's no way you can know when you're doing that. And I was like, yeah, watch me. And so I set this intention of, I wanted to start becoming aware of this behavior. And then I would notice it so much more, right? So at first, that was all I could do, was notice the behavior. I couldn't change it yet. It was still happening all the time. And it was like 50 times a day I was realizing I was doing this and trying to stop. And sometimes I couldn't. Or in the middle of the night, actually, I would wake up a few times and realize I was doing it, because I told my brain to look for that pattern. You know, just like, you know, you rent a white Jeep, a car or something, and then all of a sudden you start seeing white Jeeps everywhere. It's kind of the same thing. At first you may only be able to catch yourself in the behavior, not change it, but don't become discouraged, because slowly, and not every time, but more and more, you'll be able to stop yourself and change that behavior. It takes time, it takes effort, and it takes energy, but it's totally possible. I do this with a lot of behaviors all the time. I just want to be aware of it. And then just simply by being aware of the behavior, you've already changed it, because before you weren't aware. It's again, these things are like magic. You start to implement them in your life, and pretty soon everybody else starts to change too. So not only did I change, but my grandma has made changes because of my own changes, my mom, my husband, my little cousins. When you start to change, everybody else around you does too. Again, it's not instant, it's not quick, but it becomes so worth it. Emotions tell us why something is important, and then they tell us to act. They serve a purpose. They're like breadcrumbs, but they do not cause behaviors. They can provide motivation and cause physiological reactions, but they do not cause behaviors. We have free will. They cannot be controlled, but they can be regulated. So with awareness, we can stop the behaviors, and we have to stop reacting and start responding to the situation. And it's important to know that feelings are a normal experience. The problem is mostly external. It's not you. Remember, you're having a normal reaction, and other people in your shoes may feel the same. Emotions are meant to be felt, and they're not supposed to make decisions for you. I'm going to play this video, and just as you're watching this video, think about the emotions in terms of self-awareness. Is the awareness there? What are the signs of the current emotions? How could the child self-regulate? Some of the people you see in crisis may be stuck in their emotions, and sometimes you may have to help them identify what it is that they are feeling. I'm just going to play the first minute of this.
Very nice. Okay, looks like you got this. Very good. Oh, that's her turn. Oh, look out!
That's fear. He's really good at keeping Riley safe.
Easy, huh? My back! Oh, we're good. We're good. Thank you. Thank you very much.
And we're back.
We go. All right. Open.
It's broccoli. Well, I just saved our lives. Yeah, you're welcome.
Oh, sure. We'll eat our dinner right after you eat this. Right. Here comes an airplane. Oh, airplane. We got an airplane, everybody.
I'm not actually sure what she does. And I've checked. There's no place for her to go. So she's good. We're good. It's all great. Anyway,
All right, we'll find out what sadness is for a little bit later. But I think this is a great depiction of just, you know, what emotions are there, how somebody reacts, and you know, just thinking about how could the child self-regulate, etc. So again, this is something to think about. You know, pay attention to the words and vocabulary you use when talking to somebody in crisis. What do you say often that you have learned today or you will learn today? We haven't gone over yet. Could be a trigger and escalate. What can you say instead? How has your mood affected people around you? And what are your triggers? Could someone use them against you in crisis? Sometimes people in crisis will intentionally try to get a rise out of you. Are you aware of what your triggers are? Can you see the rise happening in the moment? So for me, it took a long time for me to realize, oh, I'm getting mad now. Oh, I'm mad, or when it's happening, right? Because when it's if I can see when it's happening, then I can make the proper adjustments to regulate myself. If I can see, oh, I'm getting mad right now, then I can tell myself, oh, maybe I need to go outside for a second and do a grounding exercise or whatever it is that it may be. But if I don't have that awareness, then I'm just going to continue to escalate into my anger, right? Empathy. Practicing empathy means having an understanding of the emotions of others. You allow yourself to stop judging and start understanding. Listen without the intent to respond. You watch body movements, verbal cues, gestures, etc. Empathy leads to compassion, which motivates us to help. And then this is my favorite video. It's just magic.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, climb down. I know what it's like down here. And you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
That's one of my favorite videos on empathy. And then to follow up, I'm going to show this one, which some of you probably might have seen it because I hear they're showing it in a lot of trainings lately. And if so, I'm sorry about the repeat.
Just, there's all this pressure, you know? And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me. And I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head. And it's relentless. And I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. Did you have a nail in your head?
It's not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there.
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing.
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
See, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See,
out.
you're not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just, sometimes it's like there's this achy, I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
That sounds really hard.
Yes. Ow!
Oh, come on. If you would just
Don't.
try to see things my way.
So oftentimes when somebody is having an issue, we want to problem solve, right? We want to fix it. We want to tell them what they need, but that's not what people need. And I think it's hard for us to understand that a lot of the time. Even for me, you know, somebody gives me a problem, I want to shoot back them advice. But a lot of the time, some people, all they need is just validation, just to be with them in that moment. And for a lot of people, that's hard. Even for me, sometimes, like, luckily I have this friend that, you know, when she's in crisis, she'll call me, but she always asks me first, do you feel like you're at the emotional capacity to be able to help me, support me right now? And I can tell her yes or no, depending on where I am. Because if I don't have the emotional capacity to support her, then I am trying to fix her, and my ego is getting involved and trying to push my stuff on her. So social skills or relationships. So these are the skills needed to handle and influence other people's emotions effectively. So, you know, we have these like mirror neurons in our brains, and that's why when you smile at a baby smiles back for you. The same thing with like breathing and that sort of thing. We need this so that we can build social connections effectively, to relate and find common ground, and to support other people through their difficult times. So one of the ways is active listening, which I'll go over real quick. And then also through NAMI, we use the LEAP method: listen, empathize, agree, and partner, which there's a whole book on it. So how to participate in active listening. Pay attention. Ask it open-ended questions, not yes or no. What can I do right now to support you? Reflect their feelings and emotions back to them. Ask for clarification when you don't understand something. Restate or paraphrase for understanding. Summarize, and listen without the intent to respond. This is so hard, especially when my mom's manic. Not quite in psychosis, but when she's manic and she's going on about something, oftentimes I already have a reply to her, and I'm not fully listening to what she's saying. But if you listen, then that's where your clues are. That's where your breadcrumbs are, is listening to what they're saying. And sometimes just a simple, that sounds hard, I'm here, is more than enough. Or I don't know what to say, that sucks. So here's a restatement. So if somebody says, it was hard enough to get up and go to work today, I needed to go to the store for some supplies and there wasn't any Clorox wipes or toilet paper. So a restatement is, I hear you saying that work was rough and the store didn't have any of the things you needed. Whereas a reflection, you're reflecting their feelings back on them. So this person is saying, everything is just so hard. I can't seem to do anything right with work or at home. And you can say back, I can see that you are feeling frustrated. Again, if you notice, we're using I statements here, not you seem this way or we're not using you by any chance. It's all I statements. I can see, I hear you saying, because when you start to use you statements, then that's when they start to feel attacked or judged. And they don't feel heard, validated, or understood. Here's another one. I stopped taking my medications because they weren't working. I felt like I was losing myself and they were taking over. So a restatement. I hear you saying you stopped taking your medication because it wasn't working. I'm just summarizing what they're saying. Reflecting. I can hear the signals they are sending about me. They are targeting me. They want my blood. What am I going to do? I can hear you are scared. So that's just some basic restatement and reflection of active listening. And here we're going to find out what sadness is for. So as you're watching this video, pay attention to the difference between joy and sadness. Is Joy listening? Does she have an ulterior motive? How would you normally respond to something like this? And what ultimately makes him feel heard?
My rocket! Wait, Riley and I were still using that rocket. It still has some song power left. Who is it brand new lanes to play? No, you can't take my rocket to the top. Riley and I go to the moon. Riley can't be done with me.
Hey, it's gonna be okay. We can fix this. We just need to get back to headquarters. Which way to the train station?
I had a whole trip planned for us.
Hey, who's ticklish, huh? Here comes the tickle monster.
I'm sorry they took your rocket. They took something that you loved. It's gone. Forever.
Sadness. Don't make him feel worse.
Sorry.
It's all I had left of Riley.
I bet you and Riley had great adventures.
Oh, they were wonderful. Once we flew back in time, we had breakfast twice that day.
Sadness.
Sounds amazing. I bet Riley liked it.
Oh, she did. We were best friends.
Yeah. It's sad.
I'm okay now. Come on. The train station is this way.
So, you know, a lot of the time, I think we get afraid to like go into the sad emotion with other people or into the anger or whatever it may be. But people just want to be seen and they just want to be heard. And when you ignore their feelings, you just make them push it down and it makes somebody blow up or escalate. Like even something like this, you know, Joy didn't want to deal with it, right? Because she thought she needed to distract him with something else, but he really needed somebody to see him and hear him in this moment. And that's what makes them able to move forward, right? Not Joy trying to make him all happy. It's sadness that comes in and makes him feel seen, heard, and validated, and then they're able to move on. So crisis means that someone is not in control of their emotions, actions, sometimes physical movements, reality, words, or thoughts. They usually end up in a crisis state due to being triggered from trauma, a mental health condition, and or substance abuse, legal or non-legal. Because my mom has gone into psychosis from her prescription medications before. You know, it just depends on where people are at. And the key to navigating a crisis is to allow the person in crisis to feel like they are in control. No need for confrontation or defensive tactics. Again, in order for them to feel like they're in control, you need to have control over your stuff. You need to have control of your emotions, your behaviors, everything. It is so hard, but totally doable and makes all the difference in the end. These are some symptoms to be wary of when somebody's in crisis. So psychosis, which is a loss of contact with reality. It's a symptom, not a disorder. I was watching this YouTube video from a psychiatrist in Sweden, I think, and he talks about psychosis as no longer does somebody have their own space. Their space has moved out into you too. So everything that you do could feel personal to them. Everything that you do could have a meaning to them because they're spaced out. That's what he called it, spaced out. That no longer is their space just here, it's everywhere else too. Hallucinations, so false sensory perceptions, delusions, false beliefs, like I talked about my mom having. Threats, weapons, spitting, fighting, aggression, paranoia or fear, suspicion, anxiousness. Paranoia is a big one. If somebody's paranoid, I mean, think about it. Put yourself in their shoes. If you were paranoid and you thought everybody was out to get you, like, how would you feel? You know, that's when people are more likely to do something violent. It's because they are scared, ultimately, right? It's fear. Rapid speech or movements, and don't interrupt rapid speech. Don't argue with reality or plans that are unrealistic. It's just not worth your time. And then sudden irritability as well. Here are some other things to do when somebody's in crisis. Practice patience. Place a safe distance between you and the other person. Be clear when you speak. Pay attention to your posture, tone of voice, body language, etc. Practice mindfulness, being calm. Listen without the intent to respond. Again, I have this here. Validate. Limit or remove distractions or potential triggers. So because my mom had the delusion that I had given her all of her bruises, I was now a trigger, right? So when the cops did go and talk to her, I could not be in the same room. You know, it's important to look at what the triggers are and to remove them because that'll just further escalate things. Be clear in your instructions. So I have this twice. So if you want somebody to sit down, tell them where you want to sit down, etc. It's, you know, oftentimes when somebody's in crisis, there's so many things happening in their mind. So it's important that you are super clear in your words. Be mindful that the person in crisis could be experiencing multiple senses, racing thoughts, voices, etc. Pay attention to the person in crisis, their feelings, values, and opinions. Again, use I statements, not you statements. We use I statements because we're only talking about from our point of view. When you use you statements, then sometimes it can make the other person feel like you are telling them how they're feeling, etc. Or it can be misconstrued, especially in crisis. Don't place judgment. Don't give advice, opinions, or try to persuade. Don't threaten, argue, challenge, order, shame, place guilt or blame. Do not use calm down, relax, etc. Those things do not work. If I'm having an anxiety attack and somebody tells me to calm down, I want to hit them in their face. Do not tell me to calm down. You know, if I could, I would. The problem right now is that I can't, and I need your support through this. You know, don't tell me to relax. I've tried. I've been trying. So when somebody tells me that, then it just further escalates and frustrates me. Like, you don't think I want to calm down? And again, don't use you statements. I see that I'm like, I want to leave some time for like questions and stuff, so might be a little bit quick on these things, but you guys are going to have these slides, so you'll be able to read them afterwards. So boundaries, what are boundaries? I didn't know what boundaries are. I had my brother, he suffers from substance abuse. Heroin is his drug of choice, and I had no boundaries with him. I have a codependency problem, so I am really paying attention to boundaries right now. So boundaries are rules or limits on how much you are willing to put up with, how people need to treat you to feel safe. It's a line of human behavior. On one side, there is no emotional harm, and on the other, there is. So what is your line? They define who you are, protect your time and energy, and give you moral guidelines. They allow you to respect and care for yourself, set healthy limits in relationships, and make time and space for healthy interactions. So these are some examples of unhealthy boundaries. I'll just say like 2 of them. Feeling like you can't say no or getting upset when others say no. A codependency, like I said. Feeling like you need to fix everything, fix others. Letting everyone know everything, so giving too much information, that's also not a healthy boundary. And then not noticing when someone violates your boundaries, that's also unhealthy. Over or under eating, accepting things that you don't want, food, gifts, etc. Going against your personal values or rights to please others. Being unable to ask for help. Also being very protective over personal information and making sure nobody knows or can see. That's also not necessarily a healthy boundary. If you do not have any boundaries, you are not emotionally healthy. It took me a long time to realize that. Poor boundaries equals resentment, anger, and burnout. And in a lot of ways, it can feel like you're disrespecting yourself. A lot of the times with dealing with my brother, if he would go over my boundaries, and I would let him, it felt like I was betraying myself almost. I wasn't holding myself to my values and opinions and what they are. People who are emotionally healthy know what their boundaries are, how to speak their truth, and can clearly communicate their boundaries. They know what to do when someone steps over them too. And when people run over your boundaries, in a lot of ways, again, self-betrayal, they're your space and how you want people to treat you within your space. And different relationships mean different boundaries. Just like you have boundaries, you need to be respectful that others do as well, even if it is not a boundary you would have. And in the beginning, when you set boundaries down, I saw this a lot with my brother and my mom. I felt guilty for setting them down, for one, and also it upset them, right? But I had to pay attention to realize, like, just because they're upset, that's not my stuff to take on. That's their stuff, right? They're getting upset because now I'm starting to stay true to who I am. These are just types of boundaries. If a physical friend touches you all the time, friend keeps calling me a nickname that I don't like. Mental, I tell myself I can't all the time. That's also a boundary. Like, here are some other examples: saying no, time boundaries, changing my mind, turning the ringer off on my phone, sacrificing your goals to please others, comments about your weight, etc. If other people have weak boundaries, it will be hard for them to respect yours. Again, my mom and my brother, they don't really have any boundaries. And so it's really hard for them to now respect mine. But it's important to speak up. I need to let you know that your actions and words hurt me, and talk about it. How did it hurt you? Here are some examples of clear boundaries. If you don't let me know ahead of time, If you keep talking badly about my friend, Usually you want to add a consequence there. Please don't expect me to respond to your 10 texts a day. I will respond when I can. Please don't call me after blank time. I need that time for me. I understand that you are upset, but please don't shout at me. I'll have to walk away. Again, I versus you statements. You're not going to say, you have to stop bothering me when I get home from work. Instead, I need some time to myself to decompress when I finish working. And then you can add something else like, please do this when I get home, or whatever. So this one, you're making too much noise, banging stuff around. You need to stop. So here are 2 things that you can use instead of that. When I am working, I need quiet so I can concentrate. If you can't respect my space, you will have to leave. Again, boundaries are not about the other person. They're about you. I'm not going to go over that. I'd like you guys just to think about all the things that you do for self-care, even if it has been a while, right? And then it's very important to know the difference between self-care versus self-maintenance. So self-care activities are things you do to care for yourself when you have time, and self-maintenance activities are things you do to maintain your current state of mental health. So like I would go through your list of things that you're doing for self-care and reframe the ones you should be doing for self-maintenance instead of self-care. Self-regulation is one of the next components. It means managing your own emotions effectively, staying in control, and redirecting negative emotions. And sometimes regulation means going into that emotion in a healthy way, giving yourself permission to feel it without judgment and with understanding. You let it surface, ask yourself what you need, go there, love yourself through it. Easier said than done, I know. So I don't know, how are we doing on time? We might not have enough time quite for this one. I'm just going to skip this one, but you guys are welcome to. This is, I think, a great, I'll just read the thing. So while joy and sadness are lost in other parts of the mind, fear, anger, and disgust are in a state of panic. It's an appropriate depiction of what can happen during a traumatic experience or a major life event to children and adults alike. Such memories can actually require more time to identify mixed emotions, process the experience, and store a memory. And sometimes we must go through a myriad of emotions until we land in a place of resolution where we properly associate the memory. So like a lot of the times when people are in crisis, there's no joy in there and there's no sadness. All you're getting is fear, anger, and disgust because that's all that's left at the wheel. Coping skills. We all develop defense mechanisms to avoid or lessen psychological pain. Coping skills are ways in which we learn to deal with various stressors, and each person copes with stress differently. Negative coping means you use quick fixes that may make a situation worse in the long run. Again, I developed negative coping skills because there was nobody to teach me coping skills. For me, that was self-harm. There's also drug and alcohol abuse, avoiding others, overeating, undereating, etc. So now I'm just going to go through I think I have maybe like 3 different coping skills. And these are great for kids and adults. I actually, within CIT, we teach officer health and wellness where I talk about emotional intelligence, and then I have them all doing these breathing exercises with me. And they seem silly and funny, but they work, and I guarantee you will remember them. And things like this need to be easy to remember. So the first one, I'd love it if you guys could be at home doing it with me. So we're going to smell the flower and blow out the candle. So pretend that you're holding a flower in front of you. Take a deep breath in, and then blow out the candle. Very simple and very easy, all right? A lot of people, they go through their whole day without even taking a deep breath, and it does so much for us. The next one is a cat hiss. So we take a deep breath in and hiss like a cat out. A lot of the time I get a lot of laughs in the room, and these things are meant to get you out of your head and back into your body. The next one is a bear breath. So take a deep breath in. I do kind of like a snore, like a bear hibernating. Hold it, and then release. Very easy. The next one, the bunny breath. So that one we're going to take 3 quick sniffs in and let 1 out. So 3 sniffs in and 1 out. And these are also great for kids too, or other people in crisis, but when a kid is having a tantrum, that's not the time to teach them these things. It's just their brain is not ready to learn. But if you have moments throughout their day where, like, just taking 5 minutes of the day where you're practicing these things, then when they are having a tantrum, awesome. Also, they can't talk most of the time when they're having a tantrum, but they can point to a picture. So maybe they already know what these breaths are, and they can point to which one they want to do. You can start doing them, and again, because of our mirror neurons, they're going to do it with you too. The next one is yoga. So really, it's just stretching, okay? Took a really long time for me to realize that. I don't know. I thought yoga was this, I don't even know what I thought it was. But really, it's just a relationship with my body. Because what happens when you get stressed out? You hold your breath and you tense your muscles. And if you don't check back in with those things, then it's 10 years later and now you have a cold shoulder or a neck pain or whatever the case may be. So for me, and trauma is held in the body. So for me, it's important for me to keep take that 5 to 10 minutes of my day just to check in and see where I'm holding things. Again, out of my head and back into my body. The next one is EFT, or emotional freedom technique. I'm not a professional, but I just briefly go over it. So again, emotions are breadcrumbs, and you're never wrong in what you're feeling. There's always a reason, and you just have to find it. find it. So with EFT, you're naming the emotion, you're touching into your nervous system, and you're loving and accepting yourself through it. So you're tapping on your acupressure points. So the first one is a karate chop here. The next one is on top of your head, and then in between your eyes, under your nose, chin, collarbone here, and then under your armpit. And usually when you're doing it, like I was tapping actually before this workshop because I was feeling anxious. I could feel my heart just like beating out of my chest. So I did some tapping, and again, you have to name the emotion. So I was saying, even though I feel anxious, I deeply and completely accept myself. So as I'm tapping, I was repeating that as well. Here are some other positive coping skills. And again, I feel like I'm running out of time. So these next two things I'm just going to briefly go over, but they're kind of like journal prompts, I guess, for pieces of your toolkit. So the following contribute to your toolkit. Each toolkit is unique to the owner, and we know ourselves best, and so only we can build the proper toolkit for ourselves. It's important to take the time to put this together now, because often we're just reacting during an emotional crisis, and these things are far away from our thought patterns. It may feel like common knowledge to yourself now, but in those moments, that knowledge is out of reach, and we need to make it easier for ourselves. And it's important to understand that not everything will work every time. That's okay. You try something else, and you just keep going. You'll get through it. Prevention is key. Know the difference between self-care and self-maintenance, and make sure you're keeping up with each. I'll show you what's in my toolkit too, just real quick. But here's one thing you can write is a love letter to yourself, because oftentimes when I go into anxiety, I am not nice to myself in my head. So it's important to take the time to know that I do love myself. And those are just thoughts I'm having in that moment. A gratitude inventory, so everything that you're grateful for. Catalog of triggers, especially right now. This is something that I'm paying attention to. Having like an evacuation plan. If you're triggered, what will you do? So here's kind of like mine, and everybody's is going to be different. Having a favorites file, so a list of everything that's your favorite inside your toolkit, so that when you're having a bad day or whatever, you can go to your toolkit and, oh, maybe I'll listen to my favorite song, or watch my favorite movie, etc. A support card, so the name of people that you can call on for support. Parameters of your control. Right now, there's so many things that are not in my control, so I try to focus on only the things that are in my control. So how I show up, how to regulate, what I'm eating, washing my car, fishing, going for a drive, those are things that I can control. So I like to have a list of everything I can control, so I'm not feeling like I have control. I can look at that list and do something from there. Here are some other supplies that you can add to your toolkit. I'm not going to go over them. It's here for you as a resource. And then like putting things for your emotions in there. So I'll show real quick what's in mine. Mine is like this box kind of thing, but it can be a shoe box. It can be whatever you want. This is also good for like if you have clients and you want them to have one, say, hey, can I show you what's in my emotional toolkit? And you bring this and you show it to them, and then it just motivates them to want to make their own, right? So in mine, I have some like dark sunglasses if maybe I'm having a headache or something and I want to shut the light off. I have a mirror to sometimes combat my negative self-talk. I have essential oil in here to help me. I have an eye mask if I want to use my phone to listen to a meditation or something. Also like things that you can touch. So I have this mushroom coral that I really like the way that it feels. So sometimes I'll grab that. My friend, she wrote all of this. It's like all like inspiration things. Like this one says, you are capable of amazing things. So this is in here. I also have like a journal with a pen. This is for smell. It's Palo Santo. Just this little pillow that my friend made in high school that just makes me feel good. And then also like a note that somebody made for me that just makes me feel good too. So Just having this here, it just, like, I don't even have to use it, just to know that I have this place for myself when I'm not feeling right. It feels good. These are different grounding exercises. I won't go through them. And then I want to leave time for questions. So I'll leave you with this. The mentally ill are not easily spotted by the non-psychiatric eye, but it accounts for many people, which is why I tend to look at those who have a mental illness as a minority, an invisible minority. The pathology of mental suffering knows no age, race, ethnicity, status, nation, sex, or sexual orientation. We all know someone who is either diagnosed with a mental illness or is suspected of having one. It is often believed that criminals are purely evil or idiotic, but sociologists have found that all on death row were directly related to abusive parents. You would have to be blind to not see how poverty can cause distress and crime. While mental illness is genetics, millions of well-intentioned afflicted do not become serial killers or gangbangers as movies would portray. However, if they didn't have adequate health care and stability, it would be easy to see the horrors we all know. Ultimately, humanity needs to recognize this minority as such, the one that the psychiatric and pharmaceutical industry thrive on, and recognize how these sufferers' mind work to be clear on what humanity is dealing with. All right. And yes. Okay, I'll take questions now.
Thank you so much, Anisa. That was such great information, and I want to thank you for being so transparent with us today. Okay, so we're gonna take some questions. The first question we have is, does NAMI have any programs with care coordinators or have a list of resources where we can refer youth?
We don't have with care coordinated services. There are a bunch of resources on our website that we have up there already, but I mean, refer people to us even if it's just like your client is having has a mental health condition, then let them know that their family can have support too, and encourage them to go to our support groups or education class. A lot of the people that go to our classes and support groups, it's invaluable, the information that they receive. And again, it's research, it's evidence-based, so it's good stuff.
Okay, next question we have is, do you have suggestions for books or ways to help teach kids about emotional intelligence?
I think just starting with those breathing exercises, just taking 5 minutes out of your day to just like, okay, let's do a bear breath. Let's do a bunny breath. Let's do this. 'Cause again, these things are not going to work if you're only doing them when you feel stressed out. You have to create the pathways for your brain to like, oh, this is what I do when I feel relaxed, right? So taking moments out of your day to meditate, to breathe, to whatever it is your coping skill is, but integrating them into your everyday life. Again, because if we're only doing it when the kid isn't having a tantrum or when we're feeling stressed out, they're not going to work as well. So also like there's like YouTube videos with like kid yoga and stuff like that. You can start small. You don't have to go big all the way. Just little things can make a huge difference. And it's better to just practice for 5 minutes a day, 3 times a week or 4 or 5 times a week versus once a week for 30 minutes. It's better to spread it out.
Great, thank you. Question is, how can you get someone who is taking medication to get back into counseling and to start back on the medicine, as this person has decided to break up their family since stopping the medication? I'm not sure how to help.
So that's when we refer people to the LEAP, which there's the guy, Dr. Xavier Amadori, he's who came up with the LEAP method. And there's a YouTube video that's like 15 minutes. He does like a TED Talk, which is like a condensed version of his, like, he has workshops and stuff too. So I would recommend, I'll put it in the chat box, looking that up. And then his book is I'm Not Sick, I Don't Need Help. And that's when he uses the LEAP method. So you listen to them, you empathize with them, agree. So you find something to agree on. So maybe you don't agree on the medication, but maybe you can find something to agree on. Like maybe they're having a hard time sleeping, or they have racing thoughts, or there's something that you can agree on. Sometimes it's difficult to find that thing that you can agree on, but that is what's going to move you forward. If you're not finding something to agree on, you're just going to stay in this like back and forth kind of headbutting stuff. But if I always feel bad because it's never a black and white answer, but once you find something to agree on, then you can partner on something. Okay, this is the plan, let's do this together. But again, it's making sure that your emotions and stuff are in check so that you can properly listen and empathize with them. Way easier said than done.
Thank you. Next question is, and I can totally relate to this one, but is showering a self-care or maintenance? I currently think of it as self-care since I have 2 small kids.
It depends. Like, it just depends. Like one of the things in the toolkit, I think I say showering, because showering can quickly, if you take a cold shower, you take a hot shower, it can get you back into your body. It's a sensory thing, right? If you're not keeping up with your hygiene very well, then it's probably is more a self-maintenance thing. But I mean, otherwise, you could see it as self-care. It just kind of depends on you and who you are.
Next question we have is, can you call 911 when someone is having a crisis and ask for a CIT officer and the person knows what you are talking about? Or is that something that may come in time once more officers are trained?
So again, they did tell me that I was going to be able to do that, but when I did, the 911 operator didn't know what I was talking about. So then when I did finally bring that up to our panel of people, they were supposed to follow up on that. So I don't know. If it's not happening now, it should be able to happen in the near future, to be able to call 911 and request a CIT officer. I'm hoping soon. We were supposed to have, so all of our training up until now has been with the TA people, technical assistance people. We were supposed to have our first ever training on our own that got canceled because of COVID.
Next question we have is, do you have any suggestions for general support for depression? I work in hospice, so I guess any recommendations for somebody working in hospice, helping people with depression?
If you yourself need some support, we have some support groups online you can go to. But I think, I'm not sure if you're asking for yourself or for people in hospice, but also like education is a big part of it, right? Because if you don't know what it is that's happening, it's harder to deal with the symptoms. So educating yourself, I think, is very important. And NAMI.org has a lot of resources for education.
Okay, and then it looks like we have one last question. It says, thanks for sharing your struggles with your brother's addiction. What have you found helps him at this time when he is doing well?
You know, that's a hard question. He's back in school right now. I think he is still currently using, I'm pretty sure. Again, you never know for sure, but I'm pretty sure that he is still using. So I've just come to this point, like he's been to rehab multiple times. But like even rehabs, like some of them, they're only like a 15 to 30% success rate, you know? And so because he's gone so many times, I think he can feel like the system has failed him. So he's not wanting to go back to rehab by any means. So the only thing that I can do right now is just accept him exactly where he's at. I used to get upset when he didn't make it to things on time, or that sort of thing. But I've just had to like change my perspective on that. Like, okay, I told my brother this time, but he's probably not going to show up then, and be okay with those sort of things. Just accepting him right where he's at. Because when I start to put expectations on him is when I get hurt. I had a huge codependency problem with him. This is like 3 or 4 years ago, where I'd given everything to him emotionally, physically, financially, and he still relapsed, and it wasn't enough. And my mental health took a toll. I actually had to take myself to Castle because I couldn't face that. So again, boundaries.
So Anisa, that looks like all of the questions for today, but do you want to leave us with any last minute words or thoughts before I close out?
No, I think just making sure that you're taking care of yourself and paying attention to your own emotions and feelings. That's where your control is. That's where your power is. So take it back. All right. Because for a long time I was powerless, and now that I found where my power is, it feels so good to be here. And again, sometimes I'm still falling down. Sometimes I still relapse. Sometimes I have a bad day, but it's all right. That's all. Relapse is part of recovery, right? It's all part of life. You just keep going, and there's always hope.
That's great. Thank you so much. So just want to say mahalo again to you, Anisa, for taking the time out of your schedule to do our training today. Again, I really appreciate your openness and being raw with this audience. I think a lot of us can really relate to some of the stories that you've shared. So thank you so much. Thank you to all of the attendees that joined on Zoom. Just a few reminders before we close out. If you are joining us today by phone, please don't forget to send me an email and let me know your name and your phone number. My email is Stephanie, STEPHANIE @HIPHI.org. I will be emailing out the link for the evaluation survey this afternoon. And if possible, please try and complete that today. At the very latest, please complete it by Monday. We are still finalizing the details for our June training, but I will be sure to send an email out to all of you as soon as we confirm speaker and topic. But again, thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope to see you again soon. Aloha.
Thanks, everybody.